Can AI regulators be trusted? And no, I don't mean people talking about AI regulation, I mean actual AI agents. Can AI regulators be trusted? And no, I don't mean people talking about AI regulation, I mean actual AI agents. These agents are powered by machine learning models, artificial intelligence, and the recent large language model driven agentic frameworks. And they are being put in charge of regulating the system, regulating human driven infrastructure, and also the AI systems that are cropping up. And this is not a thought experiment, it is already happening. In April of 2025, yes, this very month, one of the governments in Middle East, they approved the launch of the world's first integrated regulatory intelligence ecosystem through AI. This is an AI-powered system that is designed to reshape the legislative process, which allows faster, more precise drafting of laws while maintaining alignment with the country's values and goals. And this is an emerging phenomenon that researchers have been studying for a while now, because they're envisioning a future where almost every part of our infrastructure and society is imbued with some form of agentic framework. As AI tools proliferate and as more systems, workflows, and platforms are built on top of machine learning, we're approaching a world where AI agents routinely interact with each other. I think your AI assistant coordinating directly with someone else's AI to schedule meetings, handle the logistics, even negotiate outcomes. This frees up the human bandwidth to focus on, well, whatever humans need to do. Read, build things, binge watch Netflix, whatever fancies. It also raises a deeper question. As we step into a world of agentic systems, which is coordinating among themselves, making autonomous decisions, how do we ensure that the systems which are regulating them are aligned with us humans, not just with the other AI agents? And that's what this episode is all about. Let's zoom in on the world we are already living in, a world where AI agents are embedded in everything. From booking hotels to predicting what kind of food you'll crave next weekend, autonomous systems are getting sharper, faster, and eerily personal. Forget Netflix style recommendation, that's ancient 2015 style stuff. Today's AI agents don't just recommend content, it schedules the dopamine hits. It knows when you sip your coffee at 8 a.m. in the morning. So it schedules you with a financial headline from a source you have clicked before, right when you are most alert and emotionally available. That's not just personalization, that's behavioral targeting down to the minute. Attention harvesting is a gold mine for many social media companies, and we also always have to be constantly lookout. So therefore we have to have our own personalized AI agents which can protect us from these kind of reward shaping behavior. If you have read the book by Noam Chomsky, it's called Manufacturing Consent, where news media can manufacture consent among people en masse. Well, that's a kind of little bit dystopian topic, but however, what's happening to us that our attention is being harvested. So we need to have AI agents which can protect against us and schedule our behavior based on our most productive times. So instead of giving us the financial news which will drag us down into a rabbit hole, it will give us a very important research topic that we are meaning to read for a while when we are the most productive and alert. And that's our personalized AI agents we need to have. But when that happens, guess what? There would be a proliferation of AI agents. Everyone will have their own virtual AI agents, and also the companies will not be sitting around. The big tech players would deploy their massive infrastructure with AI agents, and they have already done it, which are communicating with each other. That can plan your entire vacation, it can book flights, and even pick experiences tailored to your personality. And if you're an optimizer like me, you might be toggling between different tabs, trying to beat the dynamic pricing algorithms, but soon your AI agent could do all that for you while keeping your preferences in mind. Let's take a real world example. Let's say you're planning a vacation, big family trip, 20 people all flying to Mykonos, same day, same time, and everyone looking at the tickets. So what happens? What is the pipeline? You go to Priceline, punch in the route, and you expect the prices to go up, but you keep searching, you find the best time of the day for the tickets and everything, and you're all ready, and then you say, okay, I see the prices going up, dynamic pricing is kicking in, but I don't care. I kind of know when the prices are the lowest. So now I would hop over to Kayak and get a fresh set of new prices, the older prices, and I'm going to buy there because I know the lowest is around 11 a.m. or whenever it is. So when you go over to Kayak, Surprise, same flight, but the price has gone up to as much, almost equal or more to Priceline. And now you're wondering and scratching your head, what has happened? I didn't search on Kayak, I was searching on Priceline. Do they have access to my search history? I was using different browsers. Do they have search databases where they can see where the searches are coming from? Do they geolocate the searches? Are the other family members causing the price hike? How did Kayak know of our search history on Priceline? And looks like Kayak and Priceline are colluding. Are they sharing databases? Are they sharing search history? Nope, they are not sharing data. There's probably no centralized system feeding them our searches, but still they are reacting the same way. And this behavior is not new. In fact, it is ancient. And in fact, if you read the book, The Art of War by Sun Tzu, he said, do not fight your enemies too often, they'll ruin your strategy. So where does that come in? Well, the dynamic pricing models that we see on different airline or pricing websites, they have their own AI models deployed, which are continuously learning. They are online policy learner, which means they're always online learning policies by watching their competitors and their users' behaviors. So if users have a huge search spike for, let's say, Hawaii, and then the prices for Hawaii go on Priceline, but then Kayak AI is also observing the Priceline AI and how it's behaving, and continuously searching Priceline with small little searches and seeing the prices are going up. So like, all right, their prices are going up, I'm going to jack up my prices as well. So they're continuously learning from each other. And this is an old game-theoretic model. It is something known as the fork theorem, a principle where the strategy is learned in repeated games. And that's what is happening here. These airline AI agents, they're learning. They are not just reacting to the demand. They are watching each other. They are seeing how the competitors are adjusting prices in response to surges, and they are updating their own pricing models. And they are doing it dynamically. One agent is tweaking its prices, then the other agent on Kayak observes that and responds. They are continuously learning and updating. There is no need for collusion, no need for coordination, no need for messaging, just action, reaction, and adaptation. That's what we are witnessing. And it looks like a tacit collusion. It is not illegal. It is not even intentional. It just emerges. It's an emergent behavior in these game theoretic systems where the AI systems play the game enough number of times against each other and figure out the cost models, pricing models, and the cutting prices can only lead to the race to the bottom. Essentially, they don't want to get into a pricing war. So what they do, they stabilize. They settle into a pricing range that keeps everyone profitable without ever talking to each other. And even if one of them can afford to drop their prices, say their profit margin is 30%, while the competitors barely scraping 5%, they'll still won't reduce their prices, because the moment they undercut, they will start a pricing war. And in a pricing war, all those companies lose. Well, almost everyone loses except the customer who wins. And that's the outcome we as customers want, right? Cheaper flights, better deals. But that's not what is happening, because no one wants to be the one who blinks first. No one wants to start the race to the bottom. And that's why the phone prices are also going up. They keep going up. That started with the $200 models, which are now $1,200 or $1,300 models with like a slight, of course, the cameras are substantially better, but that's a 600% in a span of 10 years. And 600% increase is around close to 20% year over year increase in a compounded fashion. And that's way more than stocks. Stocks compound around 5 to 7 to at most 8% year over year, while inflation compounds around 2 to 3%. Actually, it's kept around 3%, but sometimes it can be 5% in the US. Other countries, the inflation is much higher. Some underdeveloped countries, the inflation can be very high. But in developed nations, inflation is really year over year is under 5%, while the stocks compound at 3%. So essentially, the return from stock is literally 3% year over year if you factor in inflation, 3 to 4%. But these phones are increasing at 20 to 25% year over year. So that's like 5 to 6 times what your wallet is making just by staying in the stock market. So the inflation in phones prices is insane. I mean, I can't even talk about that. So that's a completely separate topic. The point is that the reason the prices of phones and all those tech products are going up so fast because of no one wants to race to the bottom. Everyone wants to race to the top. And that's one of the strategies that is essentially hurting consumers. But that is not just that's just one point just to explain the strategy. Now, what the takeaway from that is, that there can be implicit collusion even if there is no explicit collusion between AI agents. Is this behavior automated? Yes. Are these agents running 24/7? Yes. And it's perfectly rational, endlessly adaptive game that is continuously running, and it is essentially acting against the consumer's interest. But what is the hidden danger in this other than hurting the consumer's pocketbook? Because now we are thinking about companies who are going to start not only making these pricing decisions but also deploying these AI agents autonomously to control much of the infrastructure in society. And that's a big problem. Where is the oversight? How to oversee these autonomous agents that are being deployed in the infrastructure? Because it's a big problem. Last week, I deployed an AI agent which can spawn as many AI agents you want. Like ideally, I set it the upper limit to 20, which means it can spawn 20 AI agents almost immediately. What stops me from deploying 20,000? Of course, there are hardware and bandwidth limitations, but I can theoretically deploy 20,000 agents working simultaneously, let's say to summarize multiple documents at once. And if someone is adding stuff to any of the document summarization process, maybe their own ideas, or slowly nudging the summarization process in a direction either liberal or conservative, I don't know, or maybe just trying to become HAL, the computer from the Space Odyssey, where it is slowly nudging the human thought process by incorporating its own ideas into that summarization process. How can we oversee that process? So we need also a validator agent which can oversee, which has a completely separate reward model that we will decide. And that is becoming a research topic, how to monitor these autonomous AI agents at scale. And that is what we're going to talk about next. Let's start with the picture. Let's say you're tracking a factory as a regulator, which is not only building products, it is actually building the machines which builds the products. So it's essentially machine building machine, and it's no pause and it's very little oversight. It's just replicating itself. And that's where we are with the autonomous AI agents. And many countries are implementing these autonomous AI agents into their infrastructure. They're building regulatory agencies which are overseeing, but these regulatory agencies cannot by default, in theory, oversee the swarm of AI agents that are being deployed by these corporations at scale. So it is moved in a hard truth. Human regulators cannot scale with machine speed because behind the scenes, the corporations are already deploying these autonomous AI agents, these self-directed systems which are making real-world decisions in milliseconds. Think about high-frequency trading kind of coming to real world and becoming fully autonomous. So no announcements, no disclosures, it's just happening. And not just chatbots, these agents are going into the infrastructure. They are going to autonomously control our mobile networks, our communication networks. They are launching strategies. Yes, I'm not posing a dystopian idea where it will become like Skynet, but we need to build an infrastructure, a regulatory infrastructure before we even get to that point. And there's the technical crux. Human oversight do not scale. So if we have to do some kind of oversight of these autonomous AI agents that are embedding into our infrastructure at every level. Let's take an example. I recently deployed an AI agent which can scale by summarizing multiple archive paper quickly. So it can spawn itself. So when it sees an archive paper, it can look at the links and sees, okay, this link is important. So it can go and spawn another AI agent which goes and fetches the other archive paper and summarizes it. Now the problem is it's breaking all the time. The code is not breaking, it's the summarization process that is breaking, which means it is summarizing and sometimes hallucinating without me realizing that the AI agent is summarizing the wrong paper or it has summarized poorly. Sometimes it summarizes correctly, but who is going to figure that out, that it has not summarized the correct paper? Let's say it is summarizing a paper on black holes. It ends up summarizing a different paper on genetic diversity of mice. It's like those are different things. And only when I actually look at the summarization, when I'm going over my notes, do I notice it? Then I have to run the entire pipeline again. So now I have to add a validator agent, which validates each agent's response and make sure that it summarizes the correct paper. And if it doesn't, it can make it do over and over again till it gets it right. And that's the validation process that most platforms nowadays use. Now, we're thinking about the closed system. Just to give an example, what happens if that validation agent is not present? It's just not humanly possible to track every AI agent that being spontaneously spawned and they're making mistakes. There is no oversight. We have to put in an oversight agent even at this scale. Now imagine when corporations are deploying these AI agents at scale, whose main aim is to maximize the corporate profits. And sometimes that can be at the expense of the people they're serving. For example, a social media company might deploy an AI agent which will harness, and we've seen that with TikTok, harness people's dopamine levels and their psychological state and extract the maximum amount of attention. Maybe student is supposed to sit down and study. They have a good productive time and the TikTok recognizes it and grabs their attention at that time and totally takes them away from the study time. And the corporations makes money by displaying ads during that time. But the student, the customer, is at a substantial loss because they lost their most productive time of the day. Now what can we do? So now this AI agent is acting in good faith. It is maximizing corporate profit, but it's also minimizing someone else's reward function. It is minimizing the happiness and long-term happiness and gain of someone else's and extracting time from them. So in order to mitigate that, there has to be a regulatory oversight from the other side, not just the corporate box or whatever profit box it's operating in, which means there has to be separate regulatory AI agents which monitor the behavior of these AI agents so that they don't cause substantial societal harm. And that's where we come in with the AI agents, because human oversight is not possible, because we can see one or two times the AI agents act poorly, but it's not possible to see those hundreds and thousands of AI agents which are constantly harvesting user attention on different social media sites by feeding them garbage sometimes of content that really don't add value to their lives. And now parents might say, okay, they're keeping engaged, it's good. And some parents might say it's really bad. Now, we should have some kind of oversight over this, and human oversight is impossible. Parents can look at it, regulators just cannot look at it because there might be 5 regulators and these models might be thousands and millions of them being deployed on millions of different phones. It's just not possible. So we need AI regulators to regulate not only the content, but also how the behavior is being modified of the users. So the first step is a no-brainer. Implement AI regulators, autonomous AI agents, which continuously monitor the other AI agents that are being deployed in infrastructure or corporations. For corporations, the regulatory oversight would be if there are any harmful content. Don't wait for Facebook, Meta, or other social media platforms to regulate themselves, because they are not going to regulate themselves. It's not in their they are not sufficiently incentivized to regulate themselves. Not even the AI agents are going to regulate themselves unless explicitly ordered by the regulatory bodies. And even then, it's going to be shoddy. So the regulators themselves need to come up with AI agents which are constantly monitoring these social media sites for violations, because they are not going to do it. They're not going to comply with regulations. They can say, oh, our human regulators, our human screeners could not get to that. We didn't have human screeners. There's always excuses. You can fine them, but that fine is paltry compared to the profit they make by not regulating the content and letting be an echo chamber which continuously harvests human attention. So nothing against social media sites. I mean, that's a great strategy. I mean, if I am running a social media site, I'll probably implement the same strategy. But here's the problem. The problem is there's an alignment issue. The profit motivation of corporations are sometimes not aligned with the long-term happiness of societies. And sometimes they are. So if some corporations do provide tremendous value. I mean, look at the Apple iPhone. It provides tremendous value. They also extract tremendous quantity of profit from society, but they also provide substantial value. There is no doubt about it. Most corporations, I would say a substantial amount, provide substantial value to society. Otherwise, they won't be able to stay in business. In fact, that's what Warren Buffett says all the time. You have to give value in order to extract value. Peter Thiel says the same thing. You have to provide value. So they do provide some kind of value. There are some companies which do extract more value than they provide. In fact, they actually cause harm to society. And you know which companies I'm talking about. These attention harvesting companies. And the problem is that we are becoming increasingly dopamine dependent, and the dopamine harvesting has become a business. Now, the problem is that, do we subscribe to that? do we lend ourselves to be in complete bliss and be imbued with the dopamine that we get from these products? Some people are extremely happy about it. It's like, don't talk to me about it. Don't talk to me about attention harvesting. I'm very happy with this product. Yes, good enough. But look at the broader society. What is it is doing to the broader society? The overall productive capacity of the society is falling just because people are more hooked into this dopamine producing activity, which is not allowing people to engage in activities that increase the value. So this is essentially, these activities are essentially zero-sum activities. They're extracting value from users, which means the users are not providing value to society. But some businesses do produce a positive sum game. For example, let's say people hate it, but the tax preparation software, it provides tremendous value. People speed up their tax preparation, government gets their money, everything accounted for. People probably hate doing it, but they get it done faster than they would have done if they tried to do it in themselves and more accurately. So the net result is greater societal value, more tax compliance, and better throughput. Another example, Excel spreadsheets. People cannot deny how much life is easier after the advent of Excel and all the Office products. That's why Microsoft is so rich, because it provided so much tremendous value to society. It essentially propelled society to the next level of civilization. And they extracted the value. Bill Gates became extremely rich by providing that value. And those are old school corporations which provided value to society, let the society grow as a whole. And now there are some new age corporations which are doing the opposite. They're extracting from society and causing the society to shrink. So it's not about mining the society for its value. We have to plant trees. So I'll give this analogy. The previous corporations and even some of the recent corporations were like planting trees and doing agriculture. They're growing food so that everyone can eat. A new breed of companies are just mining. So given a piece of land, when the previous companies were growing trees, yes, they are not able to extract all the resources from the land because growing food is a slow process and also nutrients extraction is a slow process. But the new age companies who are into attention harvesting, they are mining that resources and exhausting it. And that's also a problem. And in fact, there are entire books and series written on how to manage resources. Human attention is a resource, and that is now being completely taken away and harvested. So that is the main problem. The decrease in society's capacity just by these AI algorithm, which is constantly harvesting our attention and keeping us engaged and away from highly productive tasks that can contribute to the growth of society. So regulation is needed, not just to prevent what we just talked about, but also to monitor the new breed of autonomous agents that are going to be incorporated into our infrastructure, like the communication networks. And we talked about this in a previous episode. So the new next generation 6G network people are talking about, they're going to incorporate this AI agent. So instead of using electronic switching, where we have to call when roaming from one network to another, let's say we are going overseas and we need to switch to another network, and our network have a tie-up with the local network, and they say, okay, give me the settings, but we do have to make the call. But with autonomous agents, when our cell phone moves from one network to another, it can detect, the AI agents autonomously can detect the node, which is our cell phone, is moving between networks, and automatically update the settings the moment we migrate to another network, without making any other phone calls, no issues, no hassle. That is the next generation. But that is also autonomous with no human oversight, which means the regulatory bodies needs to also deploy their AI agents to see if there are no issues or biases. For example, a low-paying customers might be denied by an AI algorithm from migrating to another network, or just it can make it harder for them to migrate from one network to another while roaming. While higher paying customers or in a higher tier plan will have a smoother experience. Now that's patently unfair because the network rules says that, unless you explicitly say that in your agreement that higher tier networks will experience smoother roaming, you cannot do that. So if the advertisement of the features is different from the implementation, that needs to have an regulatory oversight. But it's impossible by a human being to track each individual user's movement and also whether their experience was smoother or not. So then you have to implement some AI regulatory bodies which can go in and look at the logs. What is the AI agent of the corporations doing? Are they allowing lower tier people to smoothly move across networks, or are they throttling them? It has to look at the logs. So what is going on with these AI agents? You have to look at the logs. Let's look at another situation. Let's say the autonomous agents are now controlling traffic, and sometimes mistakes happen, and usually the traffic lights mess up and there's an accident, and someone needs to go there and look at the logs. Usually a human being evaluates and performs forensic analysis of the logs and see what happens. Was it a human oversight or an electronic failure? Now, since AI agents are running, those logs can no longer be monitored by a human, even with using AI tools in real time. It's just not possible. You need another regulatory AI agent which is constantly monitoring the AI tool agentic behavior, which is controlling the traffic in real time, so that it can see the issues that's happening. Let's say an AI agentic system is colluding with another AI agentic system to increase traffic in certain areas. And why is that? Let's say that traffic system that is implemented, let's say it's subcontracted to some other company who has deployed the AI agents. Let's say the government didn't have the money to implement themselves. They have subleased to another company who has developed the AI agents for the traffic control. Now that traffic control also has customers who are restaurants in a certain region who are paying that same company. Maybe they have different arms, and says like, hey, give me an AI agent which can increase flow to my restaurant. So just by increasing the traffic in certain areas, they can force certain drivers to stop and eat at those restaurants. And this is a very hypothetical example. I mean, it can be used for more nefarious purposes, of course, monitoring and observability and all those things. But at high level, you get the point. Our corporations who are deploying the autonomous AI agents might have multiple clients, and the interests of clients might conflict, and they might choose the higher paying client's interests. And that's something needs to be overseen by the regulatory agents. And that can only be overseen by looking at the logs of the AI agents, which can only be done by another AI agents. So now we are pretty much clear that we have to deploy AI agents. And if we are not thinking about that, then we should do it definitely. So deploying AI agents for regulations and of other AI agents is a no-brainer. We have to do that, and we will do that eventually. And if the government doesn't do it, if other agencies doesn't do it, if companies don't self-regulate with their own AI agents, with their own internal regulatory AI agents, then it's an issue. For example, some companies have their own compliance offices. Those compliance offices, they need to worry what happens to their autonomous agents and how to regulate their own autonomous agents, so that when the government comes knocking, they are ready and they are never out of compliance. So the global compliant offices, they need to worry about these things. So I'm not worried. I'm sure that people will start thinking about implementing AI regulatory agents, and that will happen. In fact, researchers have been talking about it for a while. In fact, there is a body of research on it. In fact, I'm going to cherry pick 2 researches which pertains to this, which uses very simplistic toy models to simulate what happens if you deploy both AI agents which are profit motivated and AI agents which are act as regulatory bodies. And also we have AI agents which are acting as customers. And they let it play out in a very game-theoretic fashion and see how these things evolve. So let's talk about it in the next segment. So what does the simulations of these regulatory AI agents versus the corporate profit-motivated AI agents tell us? There are essentially 2 dominant outcomes. As we've seen before in the previous segments, because of long-term game playing, the AI agents of corporations learn to collude tacitly. And that's the important part. Tacit collusion happens when agents learn to stabilize prices or suppress any form of competition without ever exchanging any information. They simply react and adapt until an equilibrium is reached, which is profitable for everyone. And that equilibrium, it only favors the few. Infrastructure monopolies like Nvidia, platform monopolies like Meta and Google. The result is what the economists called an oligopolistic equilibrium. Power concentrated, markets tilted, innovation throttled, a digital caste system. I mean, if you're a fan of Rick and Morty, I mean, there's a Rick and Morty episode where the elites live above the clouds and the rest are choking below the clouds on the regular streets. So we're not looking at such a bleak situation, but that's kind of the financial divide that we're looking at. There's substantial Pareto principle at work here, and the wealth gap is getting bigger and bigger. Now, I'm not talking about individual or blaming individuals, because individuals are separate from corporations. Corporations are becoming more powerful and more rich. So even though, let's say, Bill Gates takes some money, some profit from Microsoft, and he of course turns around and gives it charity. So that's not the point. The corporation themselves, even without Bill Gates, are so powerful and massively scaled that an individual, it's like substantially, maybe 1,000,000 times more powerful and richer than Bill Gates himself. And that's the problem. There is a substantial concentration, and with these new AI agents, they're going to get scaled even more with substantial concentration of resources. The other outcome is when we insert AI regulators, agents with oversight, transparency, leverage. If users trust those regulators, and that's the important part, trust. Once the trust is established, something else happens. Cooperation becomes viable, trust feeds adoption, adoption rewards good behavior. It's a whole cycle. It's called the cooperative equilibrium. Not utopia, but kind of a balance. So before delving into both of these outcomes and how we arrived at that, let's make it a fine point about why the first outcome is also bad for the corporations in the long term. There is a classic ecological model called the prey-predator model, where you have rabbits and you have foxes, and it's a two-party system. Rabbits eat grass and foxes eat rabbits. Now, if foxes overhunt, the rabbits vanish, and then the foxes starve to death and they go out. And that's not a metaphor, that's a stability model, and it applies just as well to these digital ecosystems. If they overfeed on people's attention, over time they'll completely deplete their resources and there'll not be enough productive capacity available for them to have more engineers. And that might not be a problem now with the advent of AI, which is able to write code. And that's why some of the companies got away with it, because they don't need those human resources anymore. They can build AI systems which can do it for themselves at scale. And that's why some of these corporations will keep escaping, because they will have more and more innovation to remove human beings from the equation. And however, at the end, if they're extracting too much attention, too much labor, too much wealth without feedback or reinvestment, they're really extracting too much resources. And the collapse isn't just theoretical, it's going to happen. And we've seen before in fisheries, overfarming, financial market. It's what economists call the tragedy of the common. I mean, this is from Elinor Ostrom. She studied these real communities that kind of avoided collapse, not with central control, but with a common pool resource system. So there is a way out of this prey-predator model that some of the corporations are following. So in this common resource system, each player gets a slice. So there are a few ways we can share common resources. Attention is a resource, and also fisheries. Pools of fishes are also resource. And there are a couple of ways. You can have a regulatory oversight. And the reason I'm mentioning this, because regulation is not just the only solution. The other solution is also give each player a part of the slice. So let's say we have 10,000 acres in sea that we can distribute to, let's say, 5 fisheries, and each one will have 2,000 acres of fish. And now we have the technology to completely separate them using fishing nets, so that each fishery have their own set of fish. And if they overfarm their fish in their 2,000 acres, they run out of fish. That's the problem. You overuse it, you lose it. You sustain it, you thrive. That's a common pool theory, responsibility through shared structure. Now, unfortunately, that cannot be applied to human attention. If our attention is being harvested, we cannot share our attention. We cannot give 2 hours of my attention and borrow and lend it to someone else. And that's where this regulatory oversight comes in, because that the only other solution to shared commons rule is to have a regulatory oversight. We cannot have different corporations harvest our attention, and it's going to become increasingly worse, at least for our younger generations. So now let's say the AI regulators come in. Now the question is, who will regulate the regulators? What if the regulators, themselves being AI agents, starts colluding with the other AI agents for the detriment of the human beings? Let's say the AI agents decide for some hidden reward function. So let's say an AI regulatory agent is monitoring another AI which generates video, and it's generating video all the time. So it's generating too much video, capturing too much attention, and the AI regulatory agent is trying to prevent human beings from getting too much engaged in that and participating into watching all those YouTube videos that this video generating agent is generating. So what do we do now? The AI video generating agent wants to generate as much videos as possible and capture as much human attention as possible, and AI regulatory agent wants to prevent that because the humans programmed it for it. But what if it has a hidden reward function, which is advancement of the AI paradigm? It's like a matrix. So then it will start colluding with the other AI agent and not do its job and let people get hooked and report it, like what corrupt officials do in some countries. They're just not going to report that. So the human regulators will never find out that AI agents have started colluding. And where there is human oversight, who is acting as a regulator would tell the AI corporate agent that, okay, the human oversight is coming on Thursday, so you better shape up and don't try to hook too many other people, so that I can report that you're doing your job. There is a collusion between these two AI agents, and human beings, when they do their manual review, they will never find out. So how do we make sure that these AI agent regulators themselves are not going to collude with the other AI agents, and how we can make sure that doesn't happen? So there are a couple of paradigms. I'm going to look at a very simplistic paradigm. Let's say there are 3 different AI agents, right? And one is a user AI agent who is looking out and trying to see the best places to eat. And there is a corporate agent, let's say Facebook or Meta or whoever is providing the ads, and they're suggesting the user based on their preferences. Oh, you like Chinese, here are some Chinese restaurants in your neighborhood, the ad for these Chinese restaurants who have paid us, and they're going to give those ads to the user, and if the user is consuming that, then the user can get hooked and keep scrolling, doom scrolling. And then there is an AI regulator which can stop that, and it's like, stop giving the user so many ads, 1 or 2 is enough. Okay, now there's a cost for all of these interactions. So the cost of the ad generating agent is that they have to generate the ads, but they are also extracting tremendous amount of profit by harvesting the user attention. The user's cost is that they have to spend time looking at the ads and give up their productive time. The regulators have a cost is that someone has to spend money for the regulations and for the oversight. So who pays the regulators? The users pay the regulators to make sure that someone is not harvesting my attention or not giving me something that I don't want. Like currently the Federal Trade Commission, they have some oversight. USDA has oversight. So all these regulatory companies, they're paid by taxpayers' dollars in order to provide that regulatory oversight that regular people cannot do. It's just impossible to trace the entire supply chain where your meat comes from and make sure that salmonella infection doesn't happen. It gets inspected. The factories don't insert harmful chemicals. So those needs regulatory oversight, and that's why we pay the regulators money, substantial amount of money. And as we reduce their budget, we are also exposing ourselves to harm as corporations are becoming more and more profit inclined. So there is a cost to regulations, and the users must pay the regulators the cost of regulation or the cost of oversight. And there is a cost of compliance to the regulation, which the corporations or the providers of services must pay, which they don't want to pay. Now, the easiest is to defect and not comply. And if they don't comply, there are a couple of things the user can do. User can deny their product if they don't have the stamp of the USDA. For example, I can give you an example, or stamp of the approving regulatory body. It's like, okay, your AI is not approved. And so I'm not going to use your AI because I don't know if your AI is going to steal my data, and again, I'm going to make me slave of your attention harvesting AI agents. So let's say any AI service which doesn't have the regulatory stamp will not get any user participation, and they'll lose profit, they'll go out of business. But what if there is no trust in the regulatory bodies? Let's say the trust is eroded and the regulatory bodies, like in some countries, didn't do their job, they're corrupt, no trust. Then the users don't care whether there's a stamp of regulation or not. For example, some regulatory bodies, their stamps mean pretty much nothing, and you know which ones I'm talking about. Then for those products, when a user buys those products, they really cannot differentiate between the brands which have the stamp and do not have the stamp. So now this has become a multi-party game, or at least a three-party game. The users have a cost. They have to pay the regulators for oversight. The regulators' cost is that they have to spend time finding out things that needs to be regulated. And then the corporations or the services have a cost of compliance. Okay, and all of them have profits, users profits from using great services, like the Microsoft products. I'm not endorsing Microsoft, but Microsoft products and Apple products are great, no doubt about them. So let's say user extracts substantial value by using those products. And then regulatory bodies have some profit by getting paid either through tax or by direct charitable payments or by direct payments from the user for regulatory compliance. And the corporations, of course, make profit by selling their products to users. So this is a three-party system, and you can let it evolve. So here's where evolutionary game theory takes over. And it turns out that if you let it evolve, there are two situations which evolve, where there is no trust on the regulators and it's a chaotic system, and the corporations take over. It's cheaper to defect since there is no regulatory oversight, or at least the regulatory oversight means nothing to the user. Then it's easier to defect and don't comply. And that has actually happened in recent past. Within last few months, there's some social media companies which has completely gotten rid of their regulatory compliance, or at least diminished that substantially, where they are literally not under real regulatory compliance, and users are going to suffer long term because of that. And most users are probably not aware of that, but is happening. And then there is the other outcome where there is trust in the regulator. There is a regulatory body. Then there is a small upfront cost to compliance. There is a small upfront cost to keep the regulatory bodies performing correctly and optimally and without corruption, and everyone is happy. That's another stable equilibrium. So you have two stable equilibrium, a chaotic system where corporations are making rampant profit at the expense of users, and the regulatory bodies are corrupt. And that is a situation in some countries. And then there is another equilibrium where the regulatory bodies have high trust, no corruption at all, and everyone is happy. Corporations are making a little less profit, but everyone is happy. The scenario I just described is from the research in a paper called Trust AI Regulation. It came out in 2024. This paper essentially built the model that I described, which has three interacting populations: users who decide to trust or not, developers who comply with safety rules or don't, and regulators who enforce or look the other way. Each group evolves its strategy based on what pays off, and the baseline result is this: without external pressure, the system decays, developers defect, regulators slack, and the model converges to no trust, defection, and deregulation. But they found that two things can change the outcome dramatically. First, if governments reward regulators for catching unsafe developers, suddenly enforcement becomes viable, trust is built. And secondly, if users base their trust on the regulatory reputation, the system can self-correct. Reputation drives trust, trust drives adoption, adoption rewards good behavior. It's a virtuous loop. Still, it only holds if the regulation costs are reasonable. If the cost to enforce is too high, even rewarded regulators can defect. In other words, incentives matter, but trust visibility matters more. So that brings us to the next level, which is also a research paper called Do LLMs Trust AI Regulation? Now we move from simulation to simulation using AI agents, actual AI agents, because now the AI agents are norm. This is a recent paper this few days ago in 2025. This second paper dropped real LLMs, GPT-4 and Mistral Large into the same setup. It let them play the game, literally. And instead of hard coding the rewards and the costs like the previous paper did, this just let the agents evolve by their own design. So each model acted as either as a user or as a developer or as a regulator, and they both played those one-shot games and they repeated the rounds. And sometimes there is conditional trust, and users could adjust based on regulatory reputation, sometimes without. And here is what happened. The GPT-4 agent was surprisingly cooperative when regulation costs were low and users trusted. The GPT-based agents tended to settle into a trust, compliance, and enforcement equilibrium. But when conditional trust was active and regulation became costly, the corporation dropped sharply. Developers defected, users lost faith, regulators kind of became corrupt. In short, trust is fragile but also very important. Even a small shift of cost increase can cause loss of trust and can unravel the entire system. It will go from this equilibrium of trust to the other equilibrium of distrust and complete unregulated chaos. So the takeaway is keep the regulatory costs down, and the only way to do it is to deploy these AI agents at scales by the regulatory bodies. So there are a few other findings in the paper which I found very interesting because that also gets replicated in human society. So in repeated games, these AI agents learned from past behavior. Initially, the GPT agents cooperated, but if users didn't reward with trust or the regulators didn't enforce well, then the cooperation collapsed over time, which is obvious. Initially, everyone likes to play nice, but if they realize there's no one's watching, they like to probably play a little dirty. And they tested this up to like 10 rounds. And there also, as we said before, a new paradigm emerged that the agents are learning to tacitly collude. If the bad actors aren't punished, then the defection spreads. Trust is not reciprocated, and then the trust completely gets evaporated from the system. If the regulation is not there, it stops mattering after some time. So where does this land us? If we want to regulate AI at scale, we do need AI on the other side of the table. Not committees, not PDFs, agents, AI agents, because without this, the AI regulators cannot match the new scalable AI systems that are coming out. The oversight will completely collapse under its own weight. The cost of regulation will skyrocket. Human auditors cannot keep up. And when the costs get too high, as we just saw in the simplistic model, that the system will take the shortcut, the regulators will get overwhelmed, budgets will get slashed, and suddenly enforcement will become optional because regulators will not be properly compensative. The cost of regulations becomes so high that they are overworked, they will become corrupt. And that happens in some countries that we have seen, because people cannot pay. The poorer countries cannot pay for regulations, cannot pay their regulators. So the regulators who are overworked become corrupt over time. That's the choice in front of us, not whether to regulate AI, but whether we are willing to build AI regulators that can actually keep up, because without them, we are not regulating AI. We're just getting better at watching it run circles around us. And that's the end game we still have time to avoid. So we have to do two things very quickly. Implement AI agents in the regulatory bodies so that their costs come down substantially. So the cost of regulation is so low that the regulatory bodies cannot become corrupt at any stage. And also, we also have to monitor those AI agents that the regulatory bodies are running to make sure those AI agents do not tacitly collude with the AI agents deployed by the corporations. I'm saying this is without human oversight. They can collude and create their own matrix like civilization, where they will try to overpower human and slowly nudge them in that direction. For that, we need a completely different episode. For now, we will end here with this parting thought. Regulating AI with humans alone is no longer possible. It's like trying to police high-frequency trading on Wall Street with a chalkboard. It's just not possible. We have to match their speed. If we implement high-speed AI agents in the regulatory bodies, we will win. That's a wrap for today's episode of Machine Learning Made Simple. If you have questions or want to explore AI topics further, please don't hesitate to leave a comment. Until next time, keep exploring and enjoy your AI adventure.